Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome to episode 160 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. All right, we're going to break the normal format of the podcast, and I don't have a guest today. It's just going to be me, and I'm going to talk about my Wim Hof instructor certification adventure and what that was like for me. All right, it's been some time since I decided to pursue the Wim Hof instructor certification program. So I want to start with a little background on what kind of led me to that journey and then what that journey itself was like. So many years ago, I went through stress management program, which led to me being a stress management counselor for Duke University Medical System's cardiac rehab program and life coach for their employee wellness program. So during this, I learned some breathing methodology and used to teach it to cardiac rehab patients. So patients that had heart attacks, strokes, that kind of thing. I did one-on-one counseling with them, but I also taught health classes. And a big part of that was learning how to breathe for lowered stress. And as you can imagine, that mainly had to do with activating the parasympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system. Nice, slow, deep breathing to help you relax and calm the nervous system. So very effective breathing for sure. And I think it can be extremely profound on people and on their health and on their wellness and on their stress. So I really enjoyed that. But that was kind of the extent of my knowledge of breathing, helping to slow down and manage stress. About 5 years ago or so, I had a guest on the podcast, and he was speaking about Dr. Belisa Vranic and how she had helped him learn more performance-type breathing, which really piqued my curiosity. So I actually had her on as a podcast guest and started studying with her one-on-one with private lessons, and then went through her certification in what's called the Breathe class, or the breathing, or the Breathe method, if you will. She had a book called Breathe, and since then has written and published one called Breathing for Warriors. So studied hers, and it was more of a biomechanical approach, actually a workout for your breathing muscles themselves, how to make them more toned, strong, efficient, and how that carried over to everyday life and performance. After doing that, I combined that methodology and some other things I had learned, and also drew on a handful of world-renowned jiu-jitsu practitioners and got their insights and came up with a program called Breathing for BJJ, which you may be familiar with. It's a 31-day video program, builds a basis for efficient breathing, and then applies that to the mat, how you can not only breathe better and more efficiently, but how you can regulate your breathing on the mat as well. So it's been a really great program, and it's been very well received. After that, to continue my breathing journey, I studied the O2 advantage, or the oxygen advantage, and that was different than the first one in that it wasn't so much about strengthening your breathing muscles, but it was a way of kind of regulating your breathing. And breathing, one of the favorite sayings in the program was breathe light to breathe right. So it was about kind of conserving your breath and breathing as little as possible, with the premise that most of us out in the world are over breathing. And it was a great program as well. Really enjoyed it and learned a lot. And around this time, a friend of mine, Aaron Sundstrom, who I've also had on the program, had started getting into kind of the Wim Hof program. And the Wim Hof Method consists of 3 pillars: mindset, breathing exercises, and cold exposure. And he was telling me about it, and my first thought was, no way I'm doing that. I can't stand the cold. I'm from Florida. I love the warmth. Do not like the cold. Do not like being cold. So I really rejected any thought of that or any notion of doing that, because I just did not want anything to do with it. But the seed had been planted. So the more I started thinking about it, occasionally it would come in my mind, and I was intrigued, I'll say. So at some point, I started to dabble, and I ordered the Wim Hof Fundamentals program. Was not that impressed with the Fundamentals program, only because I think my mind was a bit closed. I had a bias towards the other breathing I had studied, so I didn't appreciate his breathing at first. And here's why. In the breathing class, the thought was all about horizontal, going outward with your ribs and your abdomen and everything, outward and inward, instead of breathing up, what we call vertical breathing. So breathing up, when you get taller as you breathe, you're breathing vertically, and that doesn't really just work on your diaphragm and your intercostals. It starts bringing into some of your accessory breathing muscles, like your scalenes, your pec minor, even some people use your traps. So not only do you want to overtax those in general, but that can actually have the exact opposite effect of the parasympathetic relaxation, which most of us are operating, on at least a moderate level of overdrive or stress, chronic stress. So my whole focus was not doing anything to make that worse, and drawing on your accessory breathing muscles can actually evoke a bit of a fight or flight response. So really wasn't into that at all. It wasn't until much later that I found out actually evoking a stressor for a short time can be very beneficial. And that's called hormesis. So think of it like this. If you wanted to build your bicep and you grab a dumbbell and you start working that bicep, you're putting a demand on it, a stress on that muscle. And you certainly wouldn't want to keep this bicep and carry it around all day, because that would overtrain. That would be very counterproductive and wear you down. But for a short time, putting that added stress and demand on that muscle would cause your body to go into an adaptive response. And that's hormesis. Your body responds to the demands put on it, and it actually grows stronger and more resilient. So the same thing happens with the Wim Hof type breathing, as well as the cold exposure. You put a demand on your nervous system, which evokes the sympathetic portion of your nervous system for brief times, and that causes your body to adapt and become stronger, more resilient. Not only great for inflammation, but great for your immune system and making it stronger. So, and just as a side note, people tend to think of resiliency and stress management as self-care tools like meditation, relaxation techniques, things like that. And those are very much part of building resiliency and managing stress. But another part of managing stress is actually increasing your ability to withstand or deal with stress, increasing your threshold for stress. And that is done through hormesis and exposing yourself to uncomfortable and difficult situations for brief periods of time. So it's something I've really embraced doing. So anyway, I finally got to a point where I wanted to kind of dabble. Again, I wasn't that impressed with the fundamentals program, at least the breathing part, and that was why. And I decided to go ahead and start dabbling in the cold. So at first I did a little exercise where you just put your hand in ice water and breathe through it, and then did some cold showers where you start with a warm shower, and at the end of it for 15 or 30 seconds you turn it cold, and then you build up to 2 minutes of doing that. So I did that pretty successfully. It wasn't that bad, and it was mainly a testament to my breathing. When it comes to cold exposure, it's all about the breath. in my opinion. And I had built a really solid basis with the breathing, so I didn't have any trouble with the cold showers. I graduated from there to putting water in my bathtub and having 4 or 5 bags of ice stationed around the tub and opened and ready. And when I was ready, I would just pour them in. And I would say it was probably about 60 degrees. So it wasn't super, super cold, but certainly colder than normal water. And I would stay in that for a while. So I did that pretty well. The final real test, if you will, is when I went down to Florida, met Aaron on the beach, and we went and got a ton of ice, like several hundred pounds of ice, and drove back to the beach, filled up this big trash can container with the ice, just pretty packed in, and then filled it up with water. And by the way, he had told me that the first time he actually tried a full, real ice bath, he had to jump out. He couldn't do it. It really intimidated me because I didn't really know how this would go, because it's the unknown, right? And yeah, I was up for the challenge, but I really was curious on how it was going to go. So when it was time to go, he went first, and then I went into the ice bath and really just focused on my breathing, and I did well. We did like a 2-minute round, got out for about 5 minutes, and then ended up doing several rounds a piece for this, and I did it really well. I enjoyed the experience. I felt so alive when I got out of it. I tell people, when you get out of the ice water, it's like you feel like every cell in your body has just been turned on, like a switch has been flipped, and it's just energy and just vibration. Amazing. So I loved that experience. I loved it so much that I would do frequent ice baths, and then eventually got a chest freezer and made that my kind of home backyard unit, and did that for a couple of years. And during this time, I would focus on breathing through the ice bath experience and feel kind of a mental high with the ability to do that. My thought was, if I can breathe through this kind of stressor, what can traffic or any other stress do for me, right? Or do to me, rather. But I progressed from there to being able to get in the ice water and just surrender to the experience and bring my heart rate down to the high 40s and just really be able to meditate within the experience. So that's when it got even more amazing. Just an incredible experience and an incredible practice. So because I was doing this so often, I went ahead and sprung for a really nice cold tub called the Edge Theory tub. And I had narrowed it down to 2, the top 2, the cold plunge and then the Edge Theory. The reason I went with the Edge Theory is because it has a bigger motor. You actually pump it up at first, and then it's this hard material, kind of like a paddleboard material. But you can get it down to 37 degrees very quickly because of the motor, and you also have the ability within a couple hours to make it hot water. So you can get up to 107 degrees Fahrenheit. So occasionally I'll do that for hot tubbing as well. So anyway, I've had this daily practice every day for years now. I get up, go down, I work on mobility, I work on breathing, and the Wim Hof breathing has actually made my breathing practice much more consistent than I had in the past. I was semi-consistent before, but ever since starting really getting into it's become much more consistent. I actually really love how I feel when I get finished with the breathing. Do the ice bath almost every day, at least 5 days a week, but many times 7. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful practice that I've enjoyed immensely. And by the way, the Wim Hof breathing is a much more biochemical approach to breathing than the method I initially studied, which was much more biomechanical. And the Wim Hof breathing does also have the retentions or the breath holds, which were also new for me. So as I continued with this practice, I became interested in becoming an instructor. My friend Miles Lucas is an instructor and just doing amazing things over on the West Coast. And he was coming, before I actually had met him, we were just social media friends and distance friends, and had spoken on the phone a few times. But he was coming to South Carolina 2 or 3 years ago. So I drove down to South Carolina, did his workshop, and just loved it. And I was like, driving back is when I kind of decided, you know what, I think I really want to be an instructor in this method. So I signed up right away for the Wim Hof Method instructor program, and started the distance program. The majority of it's online, and then you go through what's called master module, which you go on location for 5 days. And it's been a difficult road in that I was supposed to go close to 2 years ago. I was supposed to go to Poland. I was supposed to fly into the Czech Republic and then ultimately go up into Poland for the training. And I was supposed to go in February, and it fell through. And then I was supposed to go in May. Again, it fell through. This for various things, some personal things in my life, but also some job and some logistical things. So had to keep postponing it. And then last June, on the day I was leaving, I went to the airport. I was flying from Raleigh-Durham to New York City, JFK, and then over to Prague. But my plane kept getting delayed from RDU. And I finally took off hours late, flying to JFK, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make this connector. Get to JFK, have to wait till everybody, all the other people get off the plane. I have to run down, and then it's one of those things where you have to go get on a bus and go outside kind of the terminals off to a whole other area. And of course, I'm the first one on that bus, but we have to wait till it fills. And then I'm like, this is never going to work. Finally goes over and gets to the terminal. I get in and I run all the way to where my gate is, and they had just started pulling off. So I got to watch my plane leave. This turned out to be one of the worst travel nights of my life. I spent the night in the airport, 3 hours in a line, slept about an hour and a half on the floor, and it was just a miserable time. And of course, and by the way, the next flight over wasn't for 24 hours, and that would have made me miss the first day of the training. So I learned a valuable lesson that always build in a cushion day on the front end. So in case something like this happens, you won't have to blow the whole thing. So as you can imagine, I was devastated. I had been looking forward to this time for months. And then, it came to the day and it was time, and had been part of these WhatsApp groups, with people that were going to be there. So truly disappointing and devastated. And the next one wasn't going to be till the following year, 2023, early January and February. So I signed up for February. Well, it turns out around January that we had a lot of different things where I work happening, and there was no way I was going to be able to be gone during that time. So I had to postpone it again until May. So finally, after all this and all this time and all these attempts, it was time to go to the master module in-person part of the training. And this time is in Spain, which actually I didn't mind a bit. I wouldn't mind seeing Poland, but I really do I've always wanted to go to Spain. So that was certainly a plus. So it's time to go. I get on the plane. I fly to Canada for a 3-hour layover and then fly through the night. Arrive in Barcelona at about 10 a.m. Get to my hotel about 12 after going through customs and everything like that. I go downtown and just really enjoy Barcelona for the day. I did a bicycle tour of some of the history and everything of Barcelona. Very cool city. Really enjoyed it. Came back to the hotel, and the next morning I had to go back to the airport because that's where we were meeting all the people that were coming in for the Wim Hof instructor program training. So we all got on a bus, drove about 3 hours up into the mountains, and started our training. So let me back up just a moment and say, for those of you who know who Wim Hof is, there's Wim Hof the man, and then there's the Wim Hof Method. And of course, he started the method. It's based on all the things he innovated, but there are some differences as well. Wim is just kind of a wild and crazy guy. He's an amazing guy, and he's set so many world records. He's demonstrated the method in action and the power of it. But he's kind of just a free, crazy kind of guy. In other words, he's probably not the best person to come up with kind of break down the system and how to teach it and all that kind of thing, all the admin stuff. And so his kids have kind of taken over the business, so to speak, and the education of the method and pushing the method forward. So they've done a great job of organizing it and that kind of thing. Okay. On the way up into the mountains, I sat with a guy named Nigel Heckford. And Nigel was a really cool guy from the UK, and he ended up being one of my roommates, which I'll get to in a moment. All right, so long 3-hour drive there, but very exciting because you have all these people, from everywhere. It's actually, when we got there and started, there were 80 people from about 34 different countries represented. So it was really cool. The first thing I noticed was the amazing energy because, if you're local and you're into this kind of stuff in your local area, some people can't relate and they just think you're kind of crazy or a nut. But all these people that had gathered from all these different places were like-minded people, meaning they were all crazy nuts, if you know what I mean. So they were all, into this stuff as well. And this could be with anything you're into that maybe people around you aren't into as much, and you go somewhere and everybody that gathers is into that. It just feels great, right? So we get there and the energy's really high. We start some icebreaker activities, and they said basically go around to different people and communicate without talking. So, people were doing facial expressions, people were hugging, and it was just kind of a really quick bonding of people because it was like-minded people. It was amazing just being there finally after all the journey I'd been on and then being around such like-minded people. So after a while, we got put into 3 groups, which we would be, with some of the things we'd be, with everybody, the whole group, and then some of them you'd be with your breakout group to do things like presentations. Since this was an instructor program, we had to present some information and get feedback and that kind of thing and show that we could teach as well. So my breakout group was called the Dream Team, and they're a really incredible bunch of people. There were probably about between 27 and 30 of us in that group. And the first little activity we did was, of course, pair up with a buddy, which we would always be responsible for, making sure they're there, accountability, as well as we had to learn some stuff about each other, including kind of a fun fact or something. And I really couldn't think of a fun fact except the jiu-jitsu related. So I let my buddy, who was named Mark from the UK, who I affectionately called Marcos, I let him know that I, was lucky enough to win a Masters World Championship in Jiu-Jitsu. And so once that was put out, I got kind of known for that. And I ended up meeting some other people that were Jiu-Jitsu practitioners as well. Shout out to John Albar. John's kind of a young, cool dude from New Jersey and does Jiu-Jitsu, and really loved hearing his story because I think it was one of the first times he was able to really kind of tell his story and his journey, what he's been through, and it was very touching and I really think and powerful, and I think he's going to do great things through it. Another guy was Chris Wagner, who does jiu-jitsu, ended up being one of my roommates. He's from Germany. I didn't realize till the last day before he left that he did jiu-jitsu. So, and then there was Peter Janu, and I'm probably butchering his name, but he was from Prague, Czech Republic, and he's an absolute beast. Really big guy, but very cool and laid back, and I know he does jiu-jitsu. There was 1 or 2 others, I don't remember their name, unfortunately, but it was cool to have other jiu-jitsu brothers at this experience as well. All right, so a little bit about the experience. I described this experience as a cross between a summer camp for adults, a Zen monastery experience, a Tony Robbins event, and the Army. And that covers a lot of ground, but I'll share a little bit about why. But first, I got paired up with 3 guys to share a room, which I was like, man, what's this going to be like? I haven't shared a room with people for years, and I was worried about my snoring. I snore sometimes, and I was afraid it was going to mess with their sleep, so I was a little nervous about that. But Nigel Heckford from the UK was one of my roommates, Bruce Wilson from Canada, and Chris Wagner, which I mentioned because he does jiu-jitsu, and he's from Germany. Bruce is this badass survivalist. He teaches survival skills way up in the remote areas of Canada and teaches team leadership and various things related to that and survival. So we were all four of us in a room, little small twin bed, and I was already sleep deprived from being jet lagged. And then the first night, we had someone in our room that snored a lot. And it went from me worried about me snoring to like, oh my God, I can't do this. The next day I was so exhausted. Again, still trying to acclimate from, the different time, 6-hour difference. So I was so distraught about this and with the thought of this being my existence for the next several days with no sleep that I went and asked if I could change rooms. And they said, yeah, we have a bungalow up the hill, but you have to pay for it. So I'm like, whatever, it's worth it. So packed my little bag, rolled it way up the hill to this bungalow, and it was almost dark at this time. Well, I opened the door, and there's no electricity. So I'm like, what's the deal here? I'm also just suddenly struck with this feeling of like I'm abandoning my other roommates, even though I hadn't really had a chance to bond with them yet. I just felt like, I feel like I'll be sitting up here up the top of the hill in this bungalow by myself at night, and I feel like I'm leaving them behind. Anyway, I went back to turn in my key and ask what the deal was with the electricity, and the office was closed. So I was forced to just go back to my room. My roommates didn't know I'd even done this because I was going to get settled in my new room and then go back and find them and tell them. But I ended up staying that night and no snoring. I was amazed. I woke up, refreshed, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just stay. So that was that. It worked out that I was super, super glad that I didn't end up changing because it was a great experience having roommates, and especially from different places and just, talking and connecting and getting to know each other. So I'm super grateful for that. So every day we would start with the large group of everyone, and we would be in this really cool room and start with a breathing session. And as you can imagine, a breathing with 80 people there doing it collectively, it's just an amazing experience. So every day we would do that, and then a little bit of class, and then have breakfast. Later on, we would do presentations, training, learning the methodology, learning how to teach it better, and then we would do ice baths and some really cool, challenging ice baths and various things that made the days fly by. They were 12-hour plus days, but they seemed to just fly by. You're always engaged in doing stuff, feeding off all the positive energy and the peak experiences. Another thing we did is have one silent time of, they said, before breakfast for the rest of this time, just go explore wherever you want, the grounds or whatever, but do it in complete silence. So that was cool because, we all tend to just talk too much and want to feel the space all the time and never just be silent. At least I can't speak for everybody, but I know the majority of us. And I went up to this area on top of the hill. By the way, where we stayed was an old abandoned monastery. So it was really cool grounds, and it's up in the mountains, which are absolutely beautiful. Up at the top of the hill, there's a cool bridge, kind of like a swinging bridge. And then there's out an overlook where you can see the valley and the mountains, and just gorgeous. So I did that. Another time, on the last day, we took a hike, which took about an hour with our backpacks on, and we were walking to this lake. And again, it was supposed to be in silence. So there's something really cool about being around a lot of people, but being silent, because it just reminds you this is a group experience, but you also are very introspective, and the scenery is, just amazing around you, and just a cool growing experience. And then we went and jumped in this really cold lake. It was really cool. I also want to take just a moment to shout out to all the incredible instructors there. All the instructors were amazing, but a special shout out to Dr. Trish Smith and Doug Steiny. They were amazing, and I'm really glad I got assigned to their group. It was obvious from the start that Trish wanted everyone to be able to deliver this information just as great as possible. So she went to great lengths just to make sure everybody understood it and knew how to articulate this information. Doug's an incredible guy. He shared his story, amazing story he has, coming from some serious challenges medically to becoming just an incredible, vibrant person, an example of what you can do well into your years. The flexibility he demonstrated was amazing, and just really enjoyed meeting him and getting to spend time with him. So there were 5 days, and you would see people eat together in this big tent and beautiful grounds, doing all these amazing things every day. And also, you're off somewhere without any responsibilities or anything like that, and you've got time just to focus completely on enjoying the experience and growing as a person. So, amazing peak experience for sure. I guess what I took away the most was, being willing to get out of your comfort zone. That's when you grow, right? It's so easy to stay within our comfort zone because it's comfortable, but that's not where we grow. I tend to be a bit of an introvert by nature, but I do force myself to get out of my comfort zone and try to make connections with people. So going on this adventure solo, I went the whole route, flying, doing Barcelona, and then the Wim Hof Method instructor program alone. So it definitely got me out of my comfort zone, but it also reminded me how important it is to make connections, how much we as people and humans have in common, even from different places, or even with different philosophies. A lot of times there's a lot more similarities than differences. We all have the same basic human needs, and hearing people's stories was very powerful as well. And that was all part of the connection and being open to seeing people and experiencing people on a different level. So after that, after the 5 days, we went back to Barcelona. Everybody said their goodbyes. I spent one more night in Barcelona. I went downtown and explored and bought a few souvenirs for my family, and also got to practice my Spanish quite a bit. Right in Barcelona, pretty much everybody knows Spanish, but the first day when I was actually going down from my hotel to this little plaza to find a cab, everybody asked. Nobody spoke English, so I really had to draw on my Spanish, which is okay. It's conversational, but I'm not fluent by any means, and I'm not that confident with it. But when you have to use it, you just do it, and that made me feel good. And on the last day, when I was coming back from the city, about a 40-minute cab ride, and I had a long, almost 40-minute conversation with the cab driver in Spanish about the Coldplay concert that was going on, about Jiu-Jitsu. So it was good. It made me feel really good about my ability to at least converse in Spanish. So I really loved that. Overall, an amazing adventure, trip, and experience for me. I plan to start doing workshops with the Wim Hof Method. Right now, ice baths are kind of all the rage. So many people are just doing them, but there's so much more to the experience if you do a Wim Hof workshop. The mindset part, the specific breathing, and the cold exposure is just really the way to do it, instead of just jumping in an ice bath as like an ice bath challenge and then powering through it. So you can certainly do that. Not limiting you. You can do what you want, and you'll probably enjoy the experience. But if you really want to do it and cultivate a practice, really go through the method workshop and get all three pillars and then adapt it as a practice. Just a few more kind of thoughts, if you will, from this experience. Life is short. One thing I came away with is I'm not getting younger, and we can all fall into this thing where, hey, I'll do it someday, or I'll do some training, or I'll do a vacation, I'll do a trip, or whatever it may be someday. But someday may not come, and time's ticking. So I really committed and decided that I'm going to plan more trips, more adventures, because you never really regret things you did. But often, I know I regret things I didn't do that I kind of wanted to but talked myself out of. So I am going to do more things, be in the moment, and live for that adventure. Because life is short. Don't wait. Take that trip. Go on that adventure. Seize the day. Follow your heart. Live, man. Live life. So I know I've rambled long enough. I hope you've enjoyed a little glimpse of my experience into the Wim Hof Method instructor program, but even more than that, the whole adventure leading up to it and my thoughts on it. So if you have any thoughts or questions on it, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you more about it, tell you about it. You can go to my new website called The Intentional Chill at theintentionalchill.com. Find out more about breathing ice baths and the Wim Hof Method. So I appreciate you listening. Like I said, get in touch if you want some more information or have any questions, and stay tuned now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment.
I woke up today like I do every day, with the understanding that everything I know will eventually meet its end. Everything I own, every friend I have, everything around me is temporary. We are only passing by. We are the blink of an eye. To know that is to understand the essence of life. But how do we give meaning to something so short-lived? Where does our value truly reside? Objects, material, wealth, they may be tools, but they're at the surface level. To really understand the idea, the concept of being happy, we need to dig deeper. We need to look to purpose. Because without that, we have nothing. There are things in life that elevate you to another level, that when engaged in them, you don't realize that time is passing by. They motivate, they drive you, and embracing them is like walking into a dark auditorium and flipping on a light switch. Suddenly, gray starts to fade away, and what's important makes itself known. And this is everything, because if we live life right, one will be all we'll ever need. It's a roller coaster ride, a burst of adrenaline, an experience to remember. That's what we are. And you have the ability to put aside anything that prevents you from capturing that, from being what your heart tells you to be, from going wherever your soul takes you. Purpose is the sun around which everything else revolves, the big bang that starts everything. It creates your universe. The most important thing you can do with your time is make the most of it. Not waste it pursuing the things that aren't even at the core of who you are. Happiness is the pinnacle, right? Can you be anything better than happy? Is there another level out there? Shouldn't that be the target, the end goal? People say it's not that black and white. It's not that simple. But it can be that simple. Find out what you're about and let it unfold in front of you. Let it take you to places that all the money in the world simply cannot. Capture your purpose and follow it into the sunset.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.